Anahita and Frederik, it's so nice to see you guys, and thank you for joining us on occasion of your participation in the 10 Encounters exhibition currently on view at Olfactory Art Keller between October 9th and November 13th of 2021. We're super happy to have this little opportunity to talk to you about your work, and I guess I'll start because Andreas is on mute, asking you just to briefly introduce yourself and your practices. Your practice, I should say.
Okay, so I am Anahita Mekanik, and I am a scent designer.
And I'm Frederik Duerinck, and I'm a filmmaker and artist. Yeah, that's what I am.
And together,
we are basically the parents of Algorithmic Perfumery.
And for like the one person who doesn't know what that is, can you explain what Algorithmic Perfumery is?
Sure, it's an experience that allows everybody to be part of the creative process of their own scent. The machine that you see in the back is the vehicle for the experience. You can connect to it by doing a questionnaire that's quite introspective, challenges a little bit your perception of self. And then based on your answers, the system, which is based on machine learning and AI, is going to create 3 one-of-a-kind formulas that are made in real time in front of you. You get to smell them, and then you are given access to the formula so you can further play and interact with the machine to fine-tune the creations.
That's awesome.
To arrive to that experience, we had to create a whole platform, hardware, software.
A lot of
things. Okay. So
simple experience.
So for this exhibition at Olfactory Art Keller, what was the meaning that you chose to interpret, and sort of, I guess, why, or how did that resonate for you?
So it was an AI and the last human on Earth, and of course that spoke to us because of the, I would say, central AI component of our creative practice with the experience. So that was the encounter, and the idea, the sort of futuristic idea was, how can this AI honor, let's say, its creator, the human, with a scent? And the idea was to create the scent of love, or at least what it had learned from the many examples of love that had been shared with it. And this is one interpretation out of billions that actually goes unevaluated by a human, since the last human has left Earth already, which gets the AI into stuck in an infinite loop of trials. And because there are no humans to give feedback on what it's doing, it just keeps creating. And yeah, this is one of the very many possibilities.
That's amazing. So did that manifest in how you actually made the scent, like that endless trial of, or loop of trials? Well, obviously not.
To some extent, but no. Yeah. There was what we did is we definitely used the fast prototyping capabilities of the platform. We evaluated many things because the AI kind of put its own spin on what ratios could be based on an input of elements that were of interest. And the final version, which can be smelled at the gallery, is basically the one that we selected out of the possibilities that we smelled. But we didn't smell billions. That's a lie.
But we did trial a lot, basically, yeah. and fast as well. So that was huge fun actually to do, because you just you let them come out, and then you feel the nuances and you feel how it's changing, and
then you pick the one.
What was input to the machine? Like, how did you actually try to make the machine understand, or not understand, but interpret love? Like, was that part of the creation process too?
Now, what we did is, in that sense, we fed it with a palette of ingredients, what we associated it with love with.
Love.
Basically, we kind of had it play around with those ingredients and come up with, you know, like really a broad range of things which came out, and then basically starting evaluating on that, and then as well guiding it as well into certain directions further.
And in terms of the you know, more specifically what those elements were, you know, we were interested in a kind of a bit of the animalistic nature of humans.
Mm-hmm.
So there are definitely some underlying notes that are not so clean, that could be, you know, reminiscent of a bit of body odor or skin. There was a lot of also softness in sort of some of the ingredients that we chose, and some musks and amber notes. There's a component which is a little bit more, and I think you picked up on it, Saskia, when we were talking, this sort of bready component. So there's this idea of, you know, the universality of bread and rice, and this kind of almost sensation of rice vapor. So those were some of the elements that were part of the input.
Is the last human, from the feedback of people in the gallery, like when they hear the story, read the story, they expect something kind of like apocalyptic and futuristic. So I'm not clear if the last human is going to a better place and this is like a happy encounter, or if the last human is killed by the AI or just dies and then there's no more human. So is this like a...
I think the idea was to capture, you know, what is the core sensation of almost being human, and what are the things that, you know, you think about when you think of love. So there's a very physical component of, you know, the material, the human body, the envelope, the you know, the things that we, you know, the secretions. And so I think from that perspective, it wasn't so apocalyptic. You say the word again.
Apocalyptic.
Apocalyptic. Thank you. And it was more the you know, the body and the physicality of being in this body as a human. It's trying to you know, understand the puzzle of what it is that it's not, or what it feels like, or what it smells like when it does not have that, you know, physicality or perception.
And I think as well, like it's trying to on the other hand, trying to understand what it actually is, like what is it compromises of, and there are many, you know, there are many parts of love, like the love of feeding the other, the love of you know, the intimate love of partners. There are many definitions of it, and therefore it's a very, you know, in a sense, a very complex thing to decipher, and it's and it has a lot to do with, you know, emotions in that sense, and therefore they're less binary, and how they originate is less binary as well. So it was not for us really to dig into, okay, why did the humans leave, or
what is it?
why,
was there an explosion?
Was there an explosion? It was really about, you know, at a certain moment when Elon Musk has his go and Earth is inhabitable and we're a you know, planetary species, like the thing that's left behind, it basically keeping the shop, and hopefully, you know, in a million years we come back to it. That's basically reminiscent and thinking of like, hey, you know, my feedback loop in a way has ended, or, you know, I miss the other species. I you know, something has changed. So it was more on that level that, you know, which we find interesting tension between.
When you were preparing this scent for this show, it's different from how you typically, I think, you know, prompt the machine, I suppose. So, I mean, I guess the question, and this is Andreas's question, but I'm taking it. Sorry, Andreas, is when you're working or thinking about scent in the context of contemporary art, versus perfumery? How does that differ?
Well, I mean, for us and what we've developed and what we're committed to is to actually close the gap. So there is no difference. That the freedom with which you would tackle one or the other would be the same. And then, there's this element of if you want to call it a sort of a cursor, of course, when you're in the spectrum of art, we're typically more used to having things that would be a no-no when you're, thinking of a scent, which is, a perfume or something that you might wear.
Right.
And I think our whole premise is it's whatever you want it to be and whatever your creative vision is around that. So I think that's a little bit the core of, what we're about and what we're trying to do is to approach everything as if, we're having this conversation earlier before kind of joining you guys, that everything is an artwork in the sense that you have absolute freedom to do as you please and to imagine what could be.
And use it in whatever way you please. Like, I mean,
use it in whatever way, you, to break a little bit the standards of, what is one and or the other. Yeah, I mean, and even when I was working in a more, let's say, traditional perfume industry format, there were a lot of artists that would come.
Yeah.
And it is true that in that context, yes, when you're working on a scent for an art project, of course, there are a lot less parameters that are given to you. It's just in service of the idea, the concept, and the sensations, or whatever it is that you're after. Typically, when you're working on again, in that specific context, working on a perfume for a brand, there's a lot more limitations that come with it, right? So you're bound to follow a brief, which is why I'm very excited where I am also now, and why I am where I am is to kind of unblock that, and break a little bit the I was going to say the dogma of the brief, let each person be the source of the brief and whatever that means for them, whatever they want.
My background is filmmaking, and I always thought like you have different ways how you come to a concept. Like one is purely from the gut, and the other one is a very conceptual. Basically you have a whole thought process, and then you end up in a certain spot, and then you materialize your work. I think either or in both cases, it doesn't matter how I would, how I'm working or where something comes from. In the end, it's always about a purity or a clarity of the concept in which you want to communicate something. And I think that's so for me, it's always that. Like it's basically true to maybe it's very egoistic, like whatever I want it to be what I envision it to be. So there is less compromise. On the other hand, even if you're a filmmaker, still you're always thinking about an audience and how you can draw them in, and that's with algorithmic perfumery. It's the same, like how you experience it. It's a lot about how you engage with an audience, how you first capture their attention, and basically then you can take them to your world that you've created for them, and then basically you can make them part of whatever story or narrative you wanna share. So I'm not from traditional perfumery, so the comparison for me, I cannot,
I get it. But you do understand the difference between sort of.
Yeah,
and I say this with a little irony, but art and commerce, but of course art is commerce. So let's get real. But I mean, there is a sort of an understanding of difference when at least that's what I learned in art school, so.
What is the fun part is what we see, basically happening is that when people really go wild and they really,
do whatever
they do whatever they want to do. And
it's surprising. Like we had actually a young girl who was here 2 days ago, and she just went crazy. Like she loved the marine accord that we have, and she just like put so much of it in there, and it was like like when I smelled her tweak, I was like, really, was not my, personal taste. She was so excited that she could get that effect, that she could get that, impact, and that she could get that sensation, more of it in what she was doing, that, and that's kind of the magic,
What I'm interested in is like the concept of authorship for your piece, right? Like people would ask me, so artificial intelligence created that, or is it like, like did you two create the piece with using the AI as a tool? Did the AI create it using you as data input slaves? Or is it a collaboration between you and the AI? Like, where do you think on that scale it would fall?
For me, I would say it's a more collaborative process and practice. We leverage the capability of the platform to generate things that we might not have thought of generating on our own. And then of course, without the initial input, in this case, the way we went about it, the output would have been different too, because it would have been a different set of ingredients that were kind of focused or highlighted. So I think it's a lot of play in this. And then I guess the authors are the platform and the humans that interact with it. I don't know.
The strange thing is, like, there are so many permutations possible that's basically unimaginable in a sense. Like, if you and what is selected as number one has a lot to do, or what comes out has a lot to do with how you train and what you use as a parameters to basically to make it do choices or to come to a conclusion. And there is always, in a way, the hand still in this phase where we are of a human.
Yeah.
So that's still that's still the case.
Ask us in a couple of years.
Yeah, I mean it's let me put it like that. It's super funny and it's super cool actually to see. It's not only that you can hypothetically come up with formulas, but it's really cool that you can say, okay, let's try 1,000, or let's try 2,000. And then the only objection that you have is basically how fast you can smell.
The limitation, yeah.
And the saturation of your nose, because there is no limitation anymore whatsoever in creating. And I think that's a shift in how this normally would operate from before. And I think that's part AI, that's part as well, the hardware, the machine itself. It's a combination of those that, make it really fun, really make it fun.
Yeah, that's very interesting. That's going to be the next exhibition. It's going to be 2,000 variations of love.
That's a lot of love. Send me like 2 variations and I'll be happy.
Accepted. When do we open? That's cool.
Actually, next week. So get on it.
No, but it's really like this. One of the things which is super cool is, of course, this idea that people can really they can really play around, and we kind of know a little bit how the landscape looks like, or the space of where perfumes combinations are, etc. And it's really cool to to do deep space exploration in that sense, and yeah. To it's uncharted territory, and there is uncharted territory. There's a lot, actually there's more uncharted territory than there is charted territory.
Definitely.
Which is amazing when you think about it.
That's that's exciting. That's the
That's
exciting.
why it's such a fun field to be in, because of all the things that are waiting to be discovered.
Yeah, very much. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, fantastic, guys. Thank you for your time and for sharing your thoughts on the piece. And
Thank you very much for having us.
and being part of this.
Yeah.